My first job. My name is Alina, and I still remember the day I first stepped into the world of work. I was 19 years old, standing on the edge of adulthood, nervous and unsure of myself. School was behind me, and though college seemed like the natural path, my family's financial situation didn't allow me that luxury. My father's health had declined, and my mother was already working long hours at a sewing workshop just to keep our household afloat. I knew I had to do something, anything, that could bring money in. But more than that, I felt a quiet hunger inside me. I wanted independence. I wanted to prove to myself that I could stand on my own feet. All my life, I had been the girl who helped in the kitchen, the girl who carried her younger siblings to school, the girl who lived in the shadow of family responsibilities. Now, for the first time, there was a door opening before me, small, shaky, but real. I had no idea that the door would lead me to a world of lessons, friendships, humiliations, small victories, and memories I would carry for the rest of my life. The job wasn't glamorous. It wasn't in an air-conditioned office, nor did it involve wearing suits or carrying files that made me look important. It was a cashier's job at a small bakery in the middle of our town. The place was called Sweet Crumbs, and its wooden door creaked every time someone entered. The aroma of fresh bread and cinnamon rolls floated out of its windows from dawn till night. I had walked past it countless times on my way to school, secretly wishing I could one day afford one of their fruit tarts. Now, I was going to work behind its counter. The day before my first shift, I ironed my plain white shirt 3 times until the creases were sharp enough to cut paper. I paired it with black pants that were a little too loose at the waist, held in place with my brother's old belt. My shoes were scuffed but polished to the best shine I could manage. I braided my hair tightly, as though neatness would hide the storm of fear swirling inside me. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake imagining what would happen. Would I mess up when handling money? Would customers yell at me? Would the owner regret hiring me? My stomach turned every time I thought about the possibility of failure. But when the morning sun pushed through the curtains, I forced myself to get up. I reminded myself, everyone starts somewhere. This is my somewhere. The bakery owner, Mrs. Green, was a stout woman in her late 50s, with round glasses that always slid down her nose. She had interviewed me a week earlier. She asked only a few questions. Can you count change? Can you come on time? Can you smile at people even if they're rude? I nodded to all 3, though I wasn't sure about the last one. When she finally said, "You can start Monday," I felt a strange mixture of relief and terror. When I walked in on my first day, the bell above the bakery door jingled, and Mrs. Green gave me a brisk nod. "You're early." "Good. Always be early. Customers don't wait." Then she showed me the cash register, the shelves of bread, the trays of pastries, and the chalkboard menu that I would have to memorize. Her instructions were rapid and firm, but I listened carefully, clutching every word as though it were a lifeline. I thought I would only be working the register, but within an hour, she handed me a tray of warm croissants and told me to arrange them in the display. My hands trembled, and I almost dropped one. Mrs. Green noticed but didn't comment. That small silence felt like mercy. The first customer I served was a middle-aged man in a suit. He ordered coffee and a bagel. My fingers fumbled with the coins, and I gave him the wrong change. He raised an eyebrow and said sharply, "This isn't right." My face burned with embarrassment as I corrected the mistake, whispering an apology. When he walked away, I felt like the floor could swallow me whole. But then, the second customer smiled at me. A young woman with a baby on her hip ordered 2 muffins, and when I gave her the change, she said softly, "You're new here, right? You'll get used to it." That sentence was like a small lantern in the darkness of my nervousness. By the end of my first shift, my feet ached, my hair was messy, and my shirt smelled like yeast and sugar. But I had survived. And not just survived, I had earned my first paycheck, even if it was modest. When Mrs. Green handed me the envelope, I clutched it like treasure. It wasn't just money. It was proof that I could contribute, that I wasn't just a burden to my family. When I got home that evening, I showed the envelope to my mother. Her tired face lit up with pride, and for the first time in a long while, I saw her smile without shadows behind it. That alone made all the nervousness, all the embarrassment, worth it. That night, I wrote in my journal. First day done. I was scared. I made mistakes. But I also stood. I think I can do this. I didn't know then that doing this would mean so much more than standing behind a counter. The second day was easier, but not by much. My nerves were still raw, and I kept overthinking every movement, how I handed change, how I placed pastries into bags, how I greeted people. But the bakery itself had its own rhythm, and little by little, I began to hear it. Sweet crumbs came alive long before the rest of the town stirred. The bakers, two quiet men named Paul and Anthony, arrived at dawn, their aprons already dusted white with flour by the time I walked in. The ovens roared, the smell of bread filled the air, and trays clattered onto shelves. Mrs. Green shuffled about like a commander directing her troops, ensuring everything was in order before the morning rush. And oh, the rush. From 7 to 9, the bakery transformed into a whirlpool of people. Office workers grabbed coffee in paper cups, mothers with children bought loaves of bread, teenagers bought cookies on their way to school. Everyone seemed in a hurry, everyone seemed impatient, and I stood at the counter trying to keep up. I dropped coins. I forgot to smile. I almost spilled hot coffee on a customer once. But slowly, something shifted inside me. Instead of drowning in the rush, I began to float with it. I realized that every person had the same pattern. They would order, wait, pay, leave. If I followed the rhythm, if I let the steps guide me, I wouldn't feel so overwhelmed. Still, mistakes found me. One morning, an older woman ordered 3 loaves of sourdough. Distracted by the line of people waiting behind her, I gave her rye bread instead. When she came back 10 minutes later, furious, my stomach knotted so tight I thought I might cry. Mrs. Green stepped in, replaced the bread, and then pulled me aside. "Alina," she said firmly, "you can't rush. People don't just buy bread here. They buy comfort. If you give them the wrong thing, you take that comfort away. Slow down. Do it right." Her words stuck with me. Don't rush. Do it right. I wrote it on a little slip of paper and tucked it in my pocket. By the end of that week, I learned to steady my hands when I counted change. I learned how to remember an order without writing it down. I learned that when customers were rude, sometimes silence was better than apology. And I learned the most surprising thing of all, that I was stronger than I thought. At home, my siblings grew curious about my job. My little brother Daniel asked, "Do you eat cake every day?" I laughed and shook my head, though sometimes Mrs. Green let me take home leftover bread at the end of the day. It wasn't cake, but to my family, it felt like luxury. I also began to notice how different I felt walking through town now. For years, I had been just another teenager, wandering streets with no real destination. But with the bakery's name stitched onto my apron, I suddenly felt visible. People saw me as someone who belonged somewhere, someone with purpose. Even if it was small, it mattered to me. And there was another quiet shift too. I began to change inside. On my 3rd week, a little girl came into the bakery with her father. She had 2 pigtails and big curious eyes. She pressed her hands against the glass, staring at the cupcakes decorated with sprinkles. Her father hesitated before asking the price, and I could see from his worn jacket and tired face that money was tight. When he ordered just 1 cupcake, I felt something tug in my chest. After he paid, I quickly slipped a 2nd cupcake into the bag and whispered to the little girl, "This one's from me." Her eyes widened, and she grinned as though I had given her the whole world. When they left, I expected Mrs. Green to scold me. But she only gave me a long look before saying softly, "Don't make it a habit." But sometimes kindness is worth more than rules. That night, I thought about it for hours. Maybe this job wasn't just about money. Maybe it was about learning how small acts could ripple into something larger. By the end of the first month, I no longer felt like a stranger in the bakery. I knew where the sugar bags were stored, how long the coffee machine took to warm up, and which regular customers liked extra butter on their toast. I began to greet people by name. They began to greet me back. The bakery had become more than a workplace, it was a tiny world where I was slowly carving my place. But with that comfort came something I hadn't expected: responsibility. Because when you start doing something well, people start expecting more from you. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. The comfort I had found in the bakery didn't last forever. Just when I thought I had begun to master the rhythm, life reminded me that growing isn't smooth, it's full of stumbles. It happened on a Friday morning, the busiest day of the week. People wanted fresh bread for the weekend, and the line often stretched out the door. I was already tense when Mrs. Green handed me the responsibility of managing the register alone while she dealt with a supplier in the back. "Handle it," she told me briskly, pushing her glasses up her nose. I nodded, though my hands were clammy. At first, I did fine. Orders came, coins clinked, receipts printed. But then, in the chaos, I made a mistake. A man ordered a dozen croissants, and in my hurry, I charged him for 6. I only realized when the next customer pointed it out, and by then the man was gone. I panicked. When Mrs. Green came back, I told her in a trembling voice. I expected her to explode. But instead, she sighed, adjusted her glasses again, and said, "Alina, mistakes cost money. But panicking costs more. Next time, slow down." Her calmness surprised me. It also made me realize something: I wasn't expected to be perfect. I was expected to learn. Still, that night I cried into my pillow, convinced I had failed. My mother overheard me and came into my room. Sitting beside me, she smoothed my hair like she had when I was little. "You're too hard on yourself," she whispered. "Do you know how proud I am of you? Every day you come home tired, but with your head high. That is success. Not perfection." Her words sank into me like rain into dry earth. The following weeks brought more trials. Once, I spilled an entire tray of muffins right in front of customers. Another time, I mixed up the coffee orders of 2 businessmen, and one of them snapped, "Are you even listening?" I wanted to disappear, but I forced myself to say, "I'm sorry. Let me fix it." And then there was the day a little boy broke a jar of cookies. Glass scattered across the floor, and he burst into tears. His mother apologized profusely, reaching for her purse, but I remembered how it felt to be small and guilty. I knelt, swept up the shards, and told her gently, "It happens. Don't worry." She looked at me with such gratitude that, despite the mess, I felt oddly proud. There were bright spots too. I began to form small friendships with the regular customers. There was Mr. Harris, an old man who came every morning at exactly 8 for a plain bagel and black coffee. He always left me a dime as a tip, sliding it across the counter with a wink. There was a group of high school girls who laughed loudly and always bought cinnamon rolls to share. They reminded me of the friends I had drifted away from when life pulled me into responsibility too soon. And then there was James. He was a university student who came in with books tucked under his arm, usually ordering a cappuccino and a slice of banana bread. He had a warm smile, and unlike most customers, he never seemed rushed. Sometimes, he lingered at the counter to ask me how my day was going. The first time he did, I stammered out, "It's busy," and immediately felt silly. But he only smiled and said, "Busy means you're important." His words stayed with me all day. I didn't know if it was friendship or the faint stirrings of something else. But every time he walked in, the bakery seemed a little brighter. Meanwhile, Mrs. Green began trusting me with more tasks. She taught me how to close the register at the end of the day, how to track which items sold the most, and how to write the daily specials on the chalkboard outside. One evening, when I finished balancing the register correctly for the first time, she patted my shoulder and said, "Good. You're learning faster than I thought." It was only a small sentence, but to me, it felt like an award. At home, my siblings looked at me differently too. Daniel boasted to his friends, "My sister works at Sweet Crumbs." My little sister Anna followed me around, asking if I could teach her to count money the way I did at the register. And my father, though frail, once held my paycheck envelope in his trembling hands and whispered, "You're helping us stand." For the first time in my life, I felt I was more than just a daughter or a sister. I was becoming someone. But with pride comes pressure. One afternoon, the bakery was unusually crowded. Orders piled up, the coffee machine jammed, and Mrs. Green was in the back dealing with a delivery. My chest tightened, my hands shook, and I felt the old panic rise. And then I remembered her words, "Don't rush. Do it right." So I slowed down. I took each order one by one. I breathed. And though some customers grumbled, by the end, everything was handled. No mistakes. When Mrs. Green came out and saw the cleared line, she raised an eyebrow. "Not bad," she said. Just those 2 words, but my heart soared. That night, I walked home under the streetlights with a tired smile. For the first time, I thought, maybe I really belong here. Thank you for watching and come back for more real moments.